Lately, I've been playing tons of Maplestory. I've been on the constant grind to try to level up my Lynx and Legion, and trying to keep up with all the events that come and go in GMS. It's a lot to manage on the daily, and sometimes I get the same urge as everyone else to go back to the good old days and just hang out. With things like Maplestory Worlds coming to North America, I finally have hope that I'm able to revisit some old places in previous versions of Maplestory, especially pre-Big Bang. When I take a look back on some maps I've spent a lot of time in, many places come to mind, but one kind of stands out to me because of the effort it took to get there, to stay there, and to arrive on the other side. It was a frustrating but rewarding journey that many players share lots of memories and feelings about. We're taking a look at the adventure from Victoria Island to Orbis. It was always a mission to travel around Maplestory, and most of the time it was done on foot. You'd spend a good chunk of your time traversing through different maps to get to the other towns, and there were minimal ways around this. Sure, you could spend a few thousand mesos to take the taxi from Hennesis to Alinea, but in old school Maplestory, all you had in your inventory was that few thousand. And of course, if you were rich or lucky enough to have generous parents, you could splurge on teleport rocks. But one thing Maplers of all sorts remember, and some definitely don't miss, is the tedious task of getting to different regions in Maplestory. Specifically, taking the ferry out of Alinea to Orbis. When leveling your character around Victoria Island, there's only so many maps you can train at and quests to complete before your EXP gains start to drop off, which means eventually you're forced to move on and explore other regions in the game. The next continent players reached for was Osiria, which is home to the El Nath mountain region. But in order to reach the city of El Nath, and of course a bunch of other fun and iconic maple towns, we had to arrive at Orbis. I would consider Orbis to be sort of like the second hub of old school Maplestory. It had its own station with multiple destinations and was designed as a whimsical city in the clouds above El Nath. So, how did we actually get to Orbis? In current Maplestory, players can just teleport almost anywhere with the push of a couple buttons. They've really cut down on travel time while emphasizing other parts of the game. But in order to progress through the game in older Maplestory, we had to utilize this ferry. In the town of Magicians, Alinea had a portal which led to a station and a dock. The dock seemingly led to nowhere as there is no water or land present. But 4 times an hour, an airborne ferry would appear, and would be accompanied by a couple wails of a foghorn. The ferry would arrive at the top of the hour, and every 15 minutes after that. There would only be a small 4-minute window upon arrival that players had to buy their ticket and talk to the usher to enter the boat. If you arrived after the 4-minute window, you wouldn't be able to enter the boat, and you'd have to wait till the next ferry arrived. Upon successfully entering, you and all the other travelers were officially aboard the ferry to Orbis. You were often met with many different types of players. Early levelers looking to meet and chat with new players, some trolls who wanted to cause trouble aboard, and even some high-level players that were seeking to tackle the infamous Crimson Balrogs that attacked the ship. There were a few places you could hang around on the ship after takeoff. It was a 10-minute boat ride to Orbis, and there was a lot going on in that time span. Lower level and casual players mostly spent their time inside the cabin, which was a safe hiding spot away from the craziness that could be occurring outside, which we will get into a bit later. Inside, players could set up mini-games like Omok or matching card games to play with other people to pass the time. It was also the perfect time to sit and talk with other players in general and make a new friend or two. Boredom definitely got the best of some, as you'd usually see people chatting about random topics or messing around with others. There were also a few people selling or buying items, especially Fame. It was a super tiny map, so people had to take advantage and get their hustle somehow. Overall, the cabin was a really chill place to hang out for those extremely long 10 minutes. I think it's one of the best places in older Maplestory, and I really feel veteran players would agree. The other 2 parts of the ferry were outside on the top and underneath. You could potentially take a gamble and hang around outside if you'd like, but you'd run the risk of dying to these. There was a decent chance for Crimson Balrogs to arrive from an enemy boat and spawn in. This was accompanied by a sudden change in the background music, and it all seemed to happen very quickly. Brave players of all sorts would face these monsters head on, and while some were successful, others weren't. These monsters could 1- or 2-shot players that were too low of a level, too weak, or just totally unsuspecting. I think everyone remembers their first boat ride where they were just hanging around outside and suddenly these giant flying beings spawned in and killed them instantly. It truly was a horrifying shock, especially because back in the day you'd not only lose EXP from dying, but dying on this boat ride forced you to return back to your previous location, no matter how far into the ride you were. Going AFK at the start of the ride was a total risk, and I remember going AFK and coming back to my character floating around its gravestone, having to return back to Victoria Island and having to wait for the next ferry to arrive. The Crimson Balrogs could also spawn underneath the boat, and there was very little room to move and just as little reaction time to be able to spot the Balrog and climb back up to safety. And if you were one of the people who defeated these Balrogs, let me know down below. The boat ride ended at the Orbis station, with your newfound comrades continuing their adventures onto new towns and regions, sometimes saying goodbye and sometimes leaving without words. Whether they were added to your buddy list or not, these people a part of these rides truly made deep impacts in all of our journeys. The experience added to the community aspect of the game, pushing the belief that Maplestory was a vast world with plenty of opportunities to create relationships and bonds with other characters. The boat rides didn't stop there either, as the Orbis station allows you to reach other areas and take new rides to different locations like Leafree and Ludibrium. But that first ferry ride to Orbis will forever remain special to players around the world. Defeating those Crimson Balrogs was a huge milestone in any Mapler's career, and actually completing the trip meant you were officially off to explore the rest of the Maple world. This 10-minute boat ride was a benchmark in a player's journey, a way for people to connect with each other and get a true sense of every individual player's quest to move up those Maplestory ranks. You can still access this part of the game by going to the 6-path crossway and entering the station through there, but now the trip is a lonely 30-second boat ride to the other side. It's awesome that the developers kept this in the game, but nothing will compare to the magic that was the original ferry ride.